All right, beautiful. So, welcome back to Earth School. I am so grateful to be here with Ari, who many of you who are listening here will also be affiliated with Jessa, and you will have heard Ari there. And that is how I got in touch with Ari. I was like, "You're amazing. Can we connect?" Um, so I'm so grateful that it worked out. And Ari, why don't you tell us just a little briefly, like who you are right now in your life, what you want to say about being on this planet in this body for right now.
Yeah. Oh, hello. Thank you for having me. Thanks for
Yeah.
inviting me on. I love getting these kinds of invitations. Who am I? Okay. So I was kind of thinking about this morning, just in a jokey way. I was like, I'm like you know, a mystic cosplaying as an astrologer, cosplaying as a coach, cosplaying as a writer, just like all these different roles.
Yes.
But then I was like, that's not really true because I'm not cosplaying any of them. I think they're all the same thing. But yeah, it's like I don't like the idea of defining myself by my roles or what I'm doing.
Mhm.
But for me, it really truly is difficult not to because,
Yeah.
like, astrology, writing, guiding people, coaching people, like, is an expression of who I am. And so I guess, like, the type of person or for me, who I am that is expressed in those roles is like this prismatic, psychedelic, like energetic athlete being who just wants to
Nice.
you know, shift energy. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I love it. I love the word prismatic. I've never heard someone use that to describe themselves, but I did my undergrad in linguistics. So I
Mhm.
really love listening to you because you use words like really richly.
Thank you.
Um, and you can tell you're a writer. And yeah, prismatic. I want to like dig into that word now and think about like what would that mean if I was prismatic? Like I wonder, what
Mhm.
does it mean to you that you're prismatic?
Mhm. Yeah, so that word was introduced to me through a like queer two-spirit shamanic community that I was in for a few years and
Mm.
describing ourselves as like prismatic, gender prismatic beings and like
Ah,
spiritually prismatic beings. And it just resonated so instantly because I really do feel like there's so many different facets of me and it just depends how the light is shining through them, that
oh
whole analogy.
my gosh. Mm, yes, that's delicious. Um, just depends how the light shines through them. Mm. Isn't that so, like, wouldn't that be an amazing way to look at all beings?
Hmm.
Because it's like not only is it how the light shines through them, but how the shadow affects their appearance as well. It's like the
Hmm.
presence or absence of the light.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is a huge moment.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's kind of a perfect analogy for incarnation, I feel like, because like, a prism is solid, right? But it's
Yeah.
like solid and
Oh,
clear. And it's like usually a sphere, but the sphere has all these like edges, at the same time. So it's like diamonds or triangles on a
yeah.
circle. So there's all this
Whoa.
like, sacred geometry in a prism.
Whoa.
So it's solid, but it's clear and light can flow through it, like energy can flow through it. I'm like, isn't that exactly what we are?
Oh my God. Yes. And this is like totally derailing, but I had an ET that was like regularly in my life and then has sort of not been super present for a little while, but I had a hypnosis session where I asked them like what am I doing here? And they were saying it has to do with like waves slash
Mm.
particles, like it had to do with what you were just saying. Like I didn't know that when I was talking to them, but when you just
Hmm.
said that, it made me feel like it's that.
Oh, I love that.
It's the
Hmm.
like wave slash particle, like material yet immaterial
Right. Yeah.
thing.
I love it because it's so like meta and quote unquote spiritual, but it's also like physics.
It's
It's just
physics.
physics. I'm just very poorly describing physics.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. I
I
love
barely
that.
have a handle on shapes, so
Oh my
you
gosh.
know.
Physics is my favorite. My secret dream is to, not secret, I've said it out loud several times, is to get a PhD in astrophysics.
Oh,
Like I
nice.
just want to like live on top of a mountain and like stare at the stars.
It's funny you say that because when I used to call myself an astropsychologist because my diploma is in astropsychology.
I didn't even know that was a
And
thing.
people would like misunderstand and think that I said astrophysicist. Like
Yeah.
they would just like translate it into astrophysicist. So
Yeah.
they thought I was like way
Super
more
smart.
proficient at fucking physics than I actually am in math. They're like, wow. And I was like, you definitely did not hear me correctly.
Still wow, but different wow.
But more confusing to you than
Yeah.
astrophysicist, strangely.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. But I bet actually that astrophysicists and astropsychologists, which I didn't even know was a thing, probably have so much more crossover than one
Yeah, I
would
mean, don't tell
realize.
the scientists, but yes.
I mean, I did have a professor who was my like honors astronomy teacher freshman year of high or college, and he definitely was like a metaphysician,
Mm.
like he was so far gone that he could barely like have clothes on his body and like talk to us. Like he had spent several years on a mountain and had, like found a star that nobody else had ever seen before,
Mm.
but he was definitely crossed over. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. I love this already, and we have not done like anything on topic, but that's okay. Um, one of my biggest curiosities is, as I mentioned when we first started talking, is sort of like where are these points at which people get these like I don't know, for me it feels like a miracle or like a grace or like a I don't know what where they have the choice that they can go out of the this is just a terrible place of suffering and victimhood and we're just stuck here and we just have to like soothe ourselves to get through it and then we die, like these little moments where you get a chance to consider something different. And I'm curious, do you have moments where you see where that happened?
Mm. Yeah, I love that so much. It's interesting. I feel like the most nihilistic I ever got was when I was like really immersed in like puritanical political ideology. I come from a very religious background, but more than that, a very, for lack of a better word, like, because I know it's just so abstract, but
Hmm.
spiritual background. So meaning
Hmm.
that like my mother and my grandmother were very religious, but their devotion to God was beyond religion,
Hmm.
which got them kicked out of churches and had them leave synagogues. And
Hmm.
so like I come from this background of like having some kind of connection at all times to um there's meaning and
Hmm.
there's reason and there's love here.
Hmm.
And so my experience with this kind of crossroads moment, this like initiation moment, basically, it was what it sounds like to me, was yeah, in my early 20s. I was like so immersed in puritanical political ideology. In other words, cancel culture, people might understand better what I mean by that.
Okay,
Um,
I was gonna ask.
yeah, so just like very intense, like everything is bad and
Yeah.
be angry and, talk only about what's bad and like,
Yeah.
this is hyper critique of the world.
Yeah.
And that was an expression of me being in a very dark time in my like personal life. And it became like my version or my attachment to political activism became my outlet, but it was
Yeah.
very depressing basically. And I don't
Yeah.
just mean that like, rhetorically, but
Yep.
like literally it was like
Yeah.
depressing me. It's like, depression. I forget the Greek word for it, but it means like in the ground,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Totally.
so yeah, I was just so I definitely reached a point where I was just like, I don't know, the best way I could describe it was like so far gone. I was just like
Mm-hmm.
so disconnected from myself, how I grew up, looking at the
Mm-hmm.
world, God, all of it. I was just like, I was just in despair, which is a
Mm-hmm.
part of the initiation process,
Mm-hmm.
when you're um becoming a world builder.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but often. And I think you're touching on that by being like, a lot of us have these moments of reaching that kind of like rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and some of us make a choice and some of us make a different choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if you give me a moment, I can locate what happened
Yeah, take your time.
after that. Um, and I feel like I've tried to locate this before, like how did I pivot? So I
Yeah.
think well, one, I think I just got so burnt out that I
Yeah.
just kind of like couldn't anymore. And
Okay.
like
Mm-hmm.
being in that, like I can't keep investing energy into this outlook and
Mm-hmm.
into this reactivity anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like opened up some space for me to kind of like shed some of that and really like begin to practice looking at life in a loving way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Was there like a person who was a possibility model for you with that? Were you like, was your body manifesting that can't anymore? Was it just in your
yeah, I mean, my
thinking?
body was such a mess. Yeah, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. My body is definitely trying to take care of me. Um, Something that comes to mind actually is so it was like 2019, I feel like I started to kind of wiggle my way out of it, because I was very focused on pleasure and like
Mm.
polyamory and like exploring
Ah,
my queerness at that
yeah.
time. Um, and you know what, now that I think about it, reading Pleasure Activism by
That's what I was
Adrienne
just gonna
Brown,
say. Was
yeah,
it pleasure
probably
activism?
helped. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it was at that point very subconscious, which is why it's difficult to locate because I feel like it's
Yeah.
just like this subconscious process of like kind of like my dream self guiding me,
Yeah.
being like,
Yeah.
go this way or you're
Yeah.
going to probably die.
And really, using Adrienne Marie Brown, for those of you who don't know who wrote Pleasure Activism, as like a prophet in a way, or like a possibility opener, because what she was doing at that time, writing that book in the midst of when all of us, not all of us, but those of us who were in that activism mindset, who were looking to her, and she was like, how about pleasure? And we were all like, are we allowed? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I feel like for a lot of folks, you know black joy or queer joy is like a is that little opening that's like, okay, I'm fighting for my rights, I'm fighting for my personhood, I'm trying to like claim
Right.
space on the planet, whatever. And then all of a sudden you get this other suggestion or idea, like, oh, and if I'm allowed to be on the planet, and if I'm saying I deserve to be treated like base level um respect, then like, do I maybe also have the right to experience pleasure? Like when I first started looking at pleasure, I really was like, no, like freaked me out, like run away. I barely
Mm,
could read that book when it first came out.
mm, mm,
I was really distressed by it. And
mm,
I had like panic attacks trying to have pleasure,
mhm, mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so it sounds like, yeah, maybe that queer, like opening up to that queer pleasure gave you somewhere to start to connect with something other than just the suffering and the fighting. Does that feel
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's so many seen and unseen things that contributed. I'm sure if I
Yeah,
went digging in
sure.
my journals, I'd have, 20 million. I'd be like, oh, and this, and this, and this.
Yeah.
But Adrian has absolutely been a model to me. I was just so immersed in emergent strategy. Even
Mm-hmm.
in 2018, went to the first emergent strategy immersion in
Mm-hmm.
Detroit. And so, yeah, they're absolutely like such a guide to me. And I mean, I yeah, it's interesting to think about how um I feel like I've reached this juncture to kind of speak to like, how do you make that choice where I felt like I couldn't be in integrity anymore if I was not in appreciation.
Mm.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
how, and kind of like you were saying, right? Like how could I be fighting for XYZ if I'm not also living for it, and as you're
Ooh.
saying, something that Adrian has really modeled and reminded us so often over the years. And then I know that the other thing that happened, the like clearest like demarcation thing was I was invited to this two spirit gathering on online, but someone who I was connected with was like, oh, you might really enjoy this. This like bruja is coming to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to that, and that was like it just like
Wow.
I still remember how I felt after, because I was just like shifted. It was like it was a thing that like reminded me who I
Yeah.
am and like
Yeah.
what I'm doing here, just in terms of like being connected to love and being connected to
Mm.
joy and being in this kind of like prismatic, like spiritual and gender and sexual experience. And so that was in like April 2020. So it was just after the
Mm.
pandemic, and like the pandemic starting was also a point where it was like, boom, it
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
everything was just like the whole world was brought to its
Yeah.
knees.
Yeah.
And that's when my Saturn return started. And so it was like this like doom, 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 like, kind of like a chiropractic
Yes.
adjustment, like get
Yes.
back into alignment with, life force flowing
Yeah.
through you, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Not just having your eyes on like the Death Star at all times.
Uh, yeah. Several times you have brought it back to like living for it, like
Mhm.
life force, like that, like access to that living energy that feels like, ooh, I can feel it in my body. And it feels like when you describe like this happened and then this happened and then this happened, doesn't it feel like, wow, like you were really taken care of? There were so many forces at play that like came
Yeah. That's why
in
I'm
this.
like, I don't know what the fuck happened, Gazi. It
Yeah,
was just like I was like being floated along.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
because I was so burnt out too.
right. It's
Yeah.
like that's the power of the rock bottom is that then you're finally like malleable and all of a sudden you can see that like, you thought you were like steering this boat and
Yeah.
you were like, I can't steer it anymore. And then you're like, I wasn't steering.
Yeah.
Like someone else has actually been doing this and they like pick it up in such a perfect way with like just placing these little things like in perfect order that only could be right for you. That's the part that like when I'm feeling really like I do not know what is going on here, I try to notice the pieces that show me that there is something at play that knows me very well, better
Mm.
than I know myself, and incredibly thoughtfully orchestrates these minute details that I couldn't even have told it would have gotten my attention in the best way. But it's just
Mhm.
like so humbling to be like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh. And then that makes me want to stay committed to that life ness because I feel like, wow, if I'm loved that much, like I do kind of want to show my love and appreciation back, even though there's plenty of times when I'm like, it's too hard again. I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
uh,
so beautiful.
you said at one point, when you were talking with Jessa that you have like a devotion to liberation. And I have been trying to understand that word recently because I also come from a religious background that was like very, very mixed up with like rules, and you are like damned if you don't follow the rules, but also the rule maker loves you a lot, and that's what true love feels like. And so it got like devotion feels really sticky to me. Um, and when I was just reflecting on what you had shared, it brought me back to that, like, "Oh, that thing loves me so much, like, I wanna love it." Like, how does devotion and how does that, like, love without the Puritan part feel to you?
Mhm. Um, yeah, I don't know if I could say it any better than you were just saying it when you were describing the this beautiful like symphony of orchestrated, reminders and comfort and support. Like the practice of noticing that feels
Mhm,
like the expression of the devotion to
mhm,
me. Um, but I think energetically how it feels on my body is kind of like a to me, devotion feels like being zoomed in.
hmm,
Like it's like I'm devoted, which to me is like another word for committed,
mhm,
but just like a little sexier maybe.
mhm,
Um, so because I'm devoted, I'm able to kind of like zoom in on love or zoom in on joy or zoom in on whatever it is I need to zoom in on that in that moment
mhm,
and contextualize everything else according to that. Right. And this is how
hmm,
like perception shapes
mhm,
reality. And so to me, it's my devotions that um my perception is filtered through, in my
mm,
best moments. Like
mhm,
it's my devotions that keep the prism clear
mhm,
enough for the light to filter through, like just
mhm,
naturally as it will. And so yeah, I guess my like how devotion feels to me is kind of like an energetic filtration system where it's like, what am I
mhm.
committed to perceiving? Like I was saying in Jessa's pod, like that perspective is malleable, but the perception is the choice, right? Like the perception is the perspective we've committed to. Like this is how I'm gonna look at things,
Mm.
right? Versus like entertaining a perspective, but you're not like, that's how I'm gonna
Mhm,
look at things.
mhm,
And so devotions help me decide how I'm going to look at things. And so it kind
mhm,
of energetically rearranges my whole reality around
mhm,
that devotion. And so I guess it's like, because it's like commitment, and devotion is very Saturnian to me because to me it's a synonym for commitment and for discipline. Like those things are devotion to me. And so it
mhm,
feels like Saturn is an anchor and a grounding. And that grounding is what allows me to like play with that perception field, rearrange my experience of my reality and like all of that. But without the devotion, without a sense of grounding, and again, to whatever it is I like want to be devoted to in the now moment. And it's not like this one ultimate thing,
That's what I was gonna ask, yeah.
Yeah. That helps me to yeah, like without it, it's a lot more difficult to filter through perception, and like energetically rearrange yourself because you're like, I don't even know what I'm rearranging around.
Yeah, yeah. So, on the, like, day to day, maybe even reflecting on how you did it in some of the earlier years, like, when you started to feel that, um haziness, or it wasn't your best day, or you were like, I don't I can't like pinpoint what it is that I'm devoted to today, and you couldn't find that like anchor, like what were some of the practices that you did to support yourself in those moments?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like even now that's still like the thing, right? It's like what do I need to feel nourished enough to be able to like identify my devotion and like rearrange my reality
Mhm, mhm.
around it because that's ever changing.
Yep.
Um I don't know. The practices answering practice questions is always difficult for me because I'm pretty like abstract, like watery being on the like day to day. So I'm like, what did I do? I don't know. I know I
Right.
journal a lot. That's a concrete thing that has held me my entire life.
Yes.
Um, yeah, it like to be honest, it really for me. And I'm glad this is coming through now because I feel like I finally have an answer to this question when people ask me about practices. But it's like
Mm.
my practice really is dropping into my energy field.
Mm.
Like that's my practice is internal,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And now I have a lot of like more concrete things that I or a few more concrete things that I do, like yoga or working out or like just taking care of my body. Like
Yeah.
I finally have like connected that of like taking
Yeah.
care of the body helps with everything else. You know, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter how you take care of it, but just take care of it. You know,
Yeah.
because I used to avoid taking care of it because I was like, I don't want to be in rigidity of like, I have to do this, I have to do
Totally.
that, I have to do this. So now I finally like let that go and I can take care of my body, and that helps me a lot, you know,
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
really you know, I used to be resentful of like all the hype and shit around wellness or like, you
Yeah.
know, just doing some little physical activity every day. I'm like,
Yeah.
so annoying.
Yeah. You're like,
Yeah.
don't like down with the
Yeah.
fat phobia. I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so interesting because I think that right now, what is a lot of people are like talking about the body in a way of like, we need to come back to it and recognize that the animal is like how we do the spiritual. And it seems like the least spiritual answer, like, how do you support the spiritual, is through the animal. But I agree with you. Like, I spent, I ended up in a psych hospital and had like really everything was done. And
Mm-hmm.
I rebuilt through something called DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's like very just like how to be a human. It's like
Mm-hmm.
super pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the skills that I spent like 3 years on is called the please skill. And it's basically like move your body, eat, sleep, like take care of what you put into your body in terms of like, does it alter your mood? Like, does that feel right to you? Like, basically take responsibility for your body. And it took me years. And it is still when I come to points where I'm like even I'm going through something right now. And last night I was like, the whole world is falling apart, like how am I going
Mm-hmm.
to make it through the night? And it was like, you don't have to fall asleep. You just have to let your body lay here for a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, you are feeling really
Yeah.
bad, but we're going to just like put some nice music on, and we're just going to feel really bad with the nice music, and we're just going to take it 1 hour at a time, and like
Mm-hmm.
really like a parent would when their kid is like, my kid is 12 and just had a stomach bug. I'm throwing up and it's the end of the world, and it's like, this feels really bad. And I'm going to be with you, and you're just going to throw up, and then it's going to feel better. It's like,
Yeah.
just coming back to those really basics of like, I'm going to eat some food, and I'm going to drink something, and I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to maybe take a short movement. And I use the word movement because I still get like high V if I hear the word exercise.
Sorry about it
It's all right. I'm working on it. But yeah, it's really fascinating that like in some bizarre way, the old Buddhist thing about like chop wood, carry water, whatever. It was
Stop
like,
would carry
oh,
water. Yeah.
oh, we all want to be like, but what about the planets? And what about, and it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
and be an animal.
Literally, exactly.
Oh my
Yep.
Lord.
Yeah. And I think, learning to be devoted to the incarnation, I think that's why it's such a basic mystical principle, actually, right? Because it's like
Yes.
that, it really is the foundation because you are incarnated,
That's what
you
you
know?
did. Yes.
Yeah. And so when it comes to like devotion, that rearranges my reality, my perception, it's like, very energetic, right? I drop in, I go into my subconscious, I go into my internal world. But that devotion to the incarnated form is what sustains me in having the capacity to be able to do that because it can be very easy, right? And the more you use that muscle, the easier it gets, absolutely. And also it still takes the effort, right?
Yeah.
It's still kind of like a workout in a way, depending how deep you're going, to get in there and be like, all right, what's my perception right now?
Yes.
What's, just get into that whole energetic field. And so that practice has gotten deeper and quicker and more efficient for me as I've allowed myself to be humbled, so to speak, right, by being in relationship with my incarnation. Because I definitely was like not into it,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
Saturn return definitely helped me ground into that. But before that, I was like, nope.
Yeah.
Mom always jokes about how like I did not want to be born. They had to induce me.
Yeah.
I was like,
You're like, I don't think so. I changed my
so
mind. I don't want to
So I
do this
maintained that same
anymore.
attitude. Yeah. I maintained that same attitude my whole life. Just like when it came to body stuff, just like, even now it's still like, I'm like, fuck, gotta like think about eating. But it's getting better. And like the better it gets, the more access I actually have um, to joy. It's like joy, pleasure, like feeling,
Mm,
I don't, I feel like you've probably experienced this, but I've been experiencing on such a deep, deep, deep level lately. Like I feel like I've been going through um just a fundamental shift in my body and in my everything through the body.
mm.
Uh in terms of realizing that like feeling good just might be the fucking point. Like
So sweet.
feeling good, like that's what we want, and not feeling good as in feeling high or feeling,
Yeah.
all these other beautiful things.
Yeah.
I'm all about the ecstasy of incarnation.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like that feeling good, that baseline relationship of security and trust in reality and um like that baseline of like I'm okay,
It's the
that is the
okay.
baseline from which like our brightest contributions emerge, and like all this other like aspirational stuff that we want in whatever realm, the worldly or the spiritual or the relational, whatever it is, like is more and more possible and accessible if we have some kind of connection to feeling
Mm.
good, I'm
Hmm.
feeling okay. Exactly like you were saying, right? Where it's like last night you're having this difficult moment, but like you have built enough capacity within yourself to be like, and it's okay.
Hmm.
Like that's kind of what I mean by feeling good.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, I feel amazing necessarily, but it's like I know that I'm okay no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
And that feels good.
Oh my gosh.
What
Right.
a
It's the
change.
okay no matter what. It's
What
like
a change.
all the time I talk to my kid about like, I'll say like it's safe to be sick. It's safe to be sad. It's safe to be whatever because I'm trying to tell myself that, you know? Because the okay no matter what is the opposite of every single program we've downloaded so far. It's like okay is always conditional. It's only conditional,
Yeah, it's
And
only dependent on external circumstances,
yeah,
on an
yeah,
external world. It's like you can have no baseline interiority of your own. It all
right.
belongs to whatever's happening outside of you.
So
And
no
that's incredibly
wonder.
liberating. That keeps you in
Exactly.
child mode because that's how children experience reality, and it's like being able to kind of like go through a maturation process out of that is so world opening.
Oh my gosh. And so terrifying.
So terrifying,
So
so
terrifying.
scary.
I keep saying to myself, like, I think maybe I'm in charge.
Yeah,
Shit.
exactly.
What am I gonna do if I'm in charge? Like, ugh.
Like I thought this was a hire an outside manager setup.
Oh
I
my
didn't
gosh.
promoting from in-house.
I know. I know. I'm like totally, totally freaks me out.
Yeah, yeah.
And, as much as I'm like so terrified, I also can tell that there's something in there that's like is true.
Hmm.
You know, it's just, it is true. I am in charge, but I'm not in charge in the kind of way that I understood being in charge. I'm not in
Control.
charge in the like, I'm gonna oppress
Yeah.
other people and control other people kind
Yeah.
of in charge.
Yeah.
I'm in charge in the like, I can't, I can't mess it up.
Hmm. Hmm.
I can't
Hmm.
do it wrong, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like ultimately why right now I'm curious about understanding these things
Hmm.
because of that little part that like I converted to Judaism about 10 years ago, and there was this one line in the Friday evening service where it said something to the effect of like God remembered you.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like there was this uh like there's a gravitational pull, and it's going to bring me back to my wholeness, my okayness, no
Oh.
matter what I do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's what I want to be devoted to, is
Yeah.
like that it's not just me. There's also this gravity thing, and there's something that's connected to me. And it's that I can't I can't do it wrong. I can play at creation, or I can play at victimhood, or I can play at just like, "Oh, I don't know," which is where
Yeah.
I think I spend
Yeah.
most of my time.
Right. That sweet middle ground.
But that like there's that guarantee.
Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's liberation,
Hmm.
right? Because we get invested into these external constructs and realities and dogmas because we're looking for that guarantee
Mm-hmm.
that we're home,
Mm-hmm.
that we are here,
Mm-hmm.
and all the things that come with that. And I love how you're articulating this because earlier when you were talking about, this force that's, orchestrating things in this beautiful way, so specific to you, like I was thinking about how like, yeah, because that's you, right?
Mm.
There's no separation between you and God and you and your reality.
Mhm.
Just like there's no separation between spirit and matter, and that's why the body is the spirit and the spirit is the body.
Mhm.
And that dissolving of the illusion of separation, that's
Mhm.
liberation because it liberates you from dogma constructs, all these external things, and all the internal wars
Mhm.
too, that really are about trying to find um freedom, you know, within and without. But it's very difficult to do when we feel like there's this hard, solidified separation,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And so that,
Dependency.
yeah. And so that, like, God remembered you is like, you remember you,
Mhm. Mhm.
and this, this connection to being, it's so old school, but I don't know how else to say it, like being one,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
one of the facets of the prism, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That
Yeah.
is God, and I use God as like synonym for reality, life
Mhm.
force,
Mhm.
whoa, everything.
Yeah.
So it's like you are that. And so you're orchestrating, and like,
Mhm.
and that's why
Mhm.
you can't do it wrong. That's why you, on some deep, deep level, are in charge because you have your back, and that's that. I think that's the devotion to liberation is the devotion to remembering that.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
all about remembering, because I think, one of the features of this third dimension is kind of like, specifically in this timeline of like it being so dominated by hierarchy, all these intersecting systems of oppression, is we are swimming in this amnesiatic fluid all the time that just
Ooh.
forget, forget. And we could get into all the different, also very old like speculations as to why that is. Oh, so we have the
Mm-hmm.
pleasure of remembering, oh, so
Mm.
that we don't go crazy. Oh, so, whatever it is. But I think that remembering is harder under oppression. I think there is some aspect of forgetting that's natural, but I don't think it needs to be this extreme,
Mm.
and so like all
Mm-hmm.
the practices, all the frameworks, all the everything is just like to help remember, to help put back together, you know, to reconnect this member. It's
Yeah.
like connecting your left arm,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
can do things.
Yeah. To let all the pieces communicate with each other,
Exactly.
and not just separation in terms of like separate from each other, but separate from ourselves and separate from our own selves. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. The like work that I do right now is about nervous system stuff and how to support the nervous system. And it's hilarious to me because every nervous system exercise is just indigenous practice. Like it's
Yep.
like, oh, breath work, move your body, you know, chant or sing or shout in a group, you
Yeah.
know, like, and meditate or be present and do that regularly,
Yeah.
and like that was just how society functioned
Yeah.
for indigenous wisdom, it was just
Mhm.
like, yeah,
Because we're all indigenous.
yeah,
We're
exactly.
all
We just
indigenous to this planet. Like our bodies are indigenous to this planet, to this dimension. And so it's like, here's how you can handle that.
doing a body on a planet, there's like these things,
A few
and it,
things.
yeah, and it's like do them together in a group because that like amplifies the effect or something. It's like
Yeah.
it's not super complicated. And you talk, I think I saw it on your website, like recovering from saviorism. There's this like pull to be saved, to save others, to save ourselves. And like when you look at how it was done, just like how breath work and movement and group vocalization was embedded into regular daily life. It was more like on Sundays, we, like weed the garden and we chant. It wasn't like, and this is how we save ourselves and this is
Yeah.
how we save others. And we're going to go like proselytize
Right. Because
about,
there wasn't as much of a like, we need to get out of something thing going.
yes, yes, yes. So, like, in those moments when you have that impulse, like, oh, I need to save myself from a painful thought I'm having, or from a painful bodily experience that I'm having, or you have a loved one who's experiencing pain and you're like, I just want to save them and liberate them. Like, how do you connect in with and remind or remember yourself like there's nothing to be saved from?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I really need to take that off my website. I realize it just outs me as a codependent. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not kidding about being codependent, but
Yeah. I'm like,
you're
yeah,
basically
we
asking,
all
how do you
are.
deal with codependence? Yeah, I mean, man, it's the hardest fucking thing, and I think Jess and I were talking about that a little. Like it's for me, I don't think I'm not saying for everyone, obviously. We all know someone who doesn't really struggle so much with that. But it's the hardest thing for me because I'm just like, I think, feeling interconnected, and kind of like choosing that perception, right? kind of amplifies that thing of like, well, your pain's my pain, just like your joy is my joy, you know? And I think like you were saying about these group practices that are indigenous to all of us, you know, somewhere down our line is like, yeah, there was like that's what we really want, I think, you know, when we like just let's sit down in a circle and, you know,
Let's
be
sing
together and like
together.
get through this. But how I deal with it and, you know, the timeline that I'm actually in is like I think I've gotten a lot better at asking myself in those moments, okay, or tell it, reminding myself like you're uncomfortable. You know, like yes,
Mm.
you're uncomfortable that this loved one is uncomfortable or that, you know, XYZ is happening externally, but you feel, you know, stressed, you feel pain, you feel rejection of the current reality, you know, and reminding myself that I'm like, okay, so if I can get into acceptance of the current reality, then I can release this kind of like amplification of the challenge energy that I'm bringing, you know, even to my loved one, which is not helpful. And then I can be more available to like how, because we are connected, like I can be more available to how I might be able to support and
Mhm.
really like allowing it to be a might be able, you know, I might be the
Mhm. Mhm.
pathway,
Mhm.
I might be the vessel, I might be part of the solution
Mhm.
materially or energetically or, you know, whatever
Yes.
emotionally. And I might not be,
Yes. 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 And you
you
can
know,
be clear about that.
yeah. And so I guess put very simply, it's self-awareness, you know,
Yeah.
or just like a more increase my capacity so then I become can be more self-aware in moments where I feel the most tense, which is in moments of suffering,
Yeah.
you know, especially suffering of a loved one.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
my own suffering. Love that, you know. I'll stay in that
Yeah. You're
all
like,
day.
let's do
Right?
it.
But other people's suffering, I'm like, no, it can't possibly be,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. 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 That's why parenting is such a trip. Oh my
I
God.
can't imagine. My
I,
cat is like having a thing right now, and I'm like devastated. And I'm like, how do parents do it?
oh
I
my gosh.
don't even know.
It's not done well most of the time. I will tell you that. It is so unbelievable. Yeah, it is wild. But what I really loved from what I just heard you reflect on that was the piece around like recognizing how you're feeling when there's perceived pain,
Hmm.
because that allows you to do the like to even consider acceptance.
Right.
If you're not like, oh, I'm upset, then you can't even
Yeah,
approach acceptance.
can't see. And it's an interesting thing about like the importance of energetic individuation.
Yeah.
Like only in energetic individuation can you really be a participant in the
Yes.
interconnection. Because when you have no sense of separation at all, then you're
Right.
just so stuck in it,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's just like not
You
helping.
can't even, yeah. And what I saw you had a recent post about grief, and I really love grief. I am trying to like bring back grief. I feel like
Normalize grief.
I am. I'm like, grief is a wonderful thing because
Yeah.
grief feels really connected to acceptance to me.
Hell yeah.
I
Hell,
if I try to accept something before I properly grieve it.
hell yeah. Learning to grieve, let's put that on the list of shit that got me to where I am now,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And what does grief mean to you now?
It's, it just feels like a portal to love. Like when I just really kind of came to an understanding of grief as an expression of love, that just helped so much because I was like, okay, it's just gonna lead to more of that, you
It just
know?
means I
So
loved
you can feel
something.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And allowing for it in this world that talks constantly about like what you think about you bring about, what you if you're focused on the negative, then you're gonna get back more negative. Like I think grief really frightens people. who have been exposed to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, what would you share with someone who's feeling that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because I was just as you were saying that, I was like, oh, but that perception of grief is actually a result of conflating grief with the kind of like suffering that comes with attachment,
And resistance.
right? Because like attachment is not the same as love necessarily.
Thank
Right?
you.
So when you're attached to something in a way that is like, uh, let's say out of survival or
Yeah.
out of addiction or out of fear, those are all really the same thing. Then when you're trying to um move through that, it just feels very hard. It's very like ugh, it's like dense and rigid and constricting,
Yeah.
you because you can't actually force yourself to release an attachment, that.
Mm-mm.
And so I
Because you're,
think people are
yeah,
completely in that
gripping it.
process of like dwelling on attachment. They're conflating that with grief.
Yeah.
Grief is just like so entirely different. It's like water, it's like it's heart opening, and I've written a bit about like learning to leave your time of grief is as important as learning to grieve
Mm.
because grief does pass through like other emotions. It is a psychosomatic experience that's kind of like overarch things, but it moves through and it yeah, it's like the reason why people resist it is because it opens your heart.
Yeah.
Grief
Yeah.
is a heart opener.
Yeah.
Um yeah, and so I think like looking at grief as negative is such a misunderstanding, because it's not grief is not about feeling bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
Grief is something else entirely.
it's in those times when I've really felt an authentic connection with grief, I have felt like it was a lot of allowing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Like my like favorite human was my one of my aunts. And when she died, I had, leading up to it, a lot of like, please don't do this. Like you are one of the reasons why I'm okay being here. Like, please don't do this.
Mhm.
And then when I got to the point of realizing that she wanted to be able to go,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh,
Mm.
I trust you.
Yeah.
Like I trust you. You know what's best.
Yeah.
And that felt like actual grief because it
Yeah.
felt like I could actually be like, this is her decision.
Mm.
And I want to celebrate her in it, because it for what I don't understand it. I can't see why, but this is what she is ready for.
Mhm.
And that allowing is so different from the like, you're being pulled out of my hands and it's not okay. And I am so mad and pissed. And I am like never going to feel okay again because I didn't want this to happen.
Yeah.
And
And that's attachment,
yeah,
to like a specific outcome or specific thing, which is a rejection of
yeah,
what's actually happening. So
yeah,
grief is an acceptance and allowing of what's actually happening. And even the
yeah.
way you said, "Oh, okay, I trust you," it reminded me of I took a hero dose of shrooms before my birthday in
Hmm.
October and had all this grief come up and move through. And one of the things that I kept saying, I was just like, "Oh," like just over and over again. I was just, "It's okay."
Like, I was confused.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, it's okay. But it's exactly like how you said, and I was like, I trust you. And so to have that
Mm,
relationship, that you had with your aunt in that moment, to have that relationship with life, and be like, I don't
mm,
understand, but this is the way this is going. I'll allow it, aka
mm,
allow it to flow through me.
mm-hmm,
And
mm.
that's how you build trust. You cannot
Yeah.
build trust with reality if you do not think that reality has some kind of intelligence, aka
There you
that you have
go.
some kind of intelligence, that energy has intelligence, like,
Yeah.
and it's all designed, you know, I can't speak for other dimensions, but at least in this dimension, it's all designed towards life force flowing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm rebuilding
Mm-hmm.
that trust amidst all this, you know, just kind of unnatural level of the opposite of that, you know, is like, I think that's the heart of the work right now, in my
Quite a
opinion.
trip. Quite a trip. Well, listen, this has been so like gushy. Just thank
I
you.
love that. Thank
I
you. This is such a great conversation.
I really am grateful. And I just, my one of the things that has been trickiest for me about being a human is that like I'm like, how about we dive into this really like murky, mystical, like painful world and just swim in it together for a few minutes. And many people are like, what? So when I find someone who's willing to do it with me,
Mm,
I just really feel grateful. So thank you
yeah,
so much.
thank you.
Ah,
Mhm.
so just for the peoples, you have a website called the dreammami.com, MAMI, right?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm really excited because I'm gonna be joining your melting
Oh yeah.
Piscean adventure, which also just felt like, yes, I want to melt in some water. Thank you. So I'm excited for that. And you have a program that maybe has already started. So maybe that's not available the January 20th.
Yeah, World Building School 2.0, that's closed. But World Building 101, which is the foundational teaching of World Building School, is now available for purchase, and that's
Awesome.
new.
Awesome. Okay. And anything else that you want to share or point people to?
Um, Yeah, well, you mentioned a melt, which is my Pisces season immersion, which is actually literally everything we talked about today. If you want
Yay.
to know what melt is about, it's about this fucking conversation, 100%. So that begins on the 24th, and I have a Substack where I write about all of this shit as well. So that's arifelix.substack.com or the Dream Realm. Um, yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much for allowing me to plug things and for inviting me. I'm so happy to connect. Feels like
Mm.
real world building kin.
Thank you. Me too. So I'll just end the recording, and if you want to hang for a second, we can
Mhm.
start.